The October wind whispered through the cold window panes of the Kingsville County Courthouse, carrying with it a quiet chill that seeped into an already heavy atmosphere. Outside, small groups of people gathered, murmuring with curiosity, their eyes fixed on the courthouse's front doors, where one of the most controversial trials in the past decade was about to begin. But inside, in a small room shielded from the public gaze, a 3-year-old girl with tousled golden curls sat curled up in the corner of a bench, her swollen, empty eyes staring blankly at a grayish-white wall. Her name was Emily Carter. At just 3 years old, Emily's gaze no longer held the innocence of a child. Instead, there was an eerie stillness, as if she was carrying something far too heavy, far too dark for her young soul to understand or express. Emily didn't cry. She didn't speak to anyone, not her mother, not the psychologist, not the social workers. The only things she responded to were an old tattered stuffed animal and a golden brown dog quietly lying by her feet. His name was Max, a police dog with the Kingsville Police Department. Max wasn't like the typical canine seen in criminal cases. He didn't growl, didn't intimidate, and wasn't there to sniff out evidence. Max had been specially trained for one purpose only: to accompany and comfort young victims in abuse cases. To Emily, Max wasn't just a dog. He was the only one she could trust, the only one she dared to touch, the only presence that calmed her night terrors. 2 months earlier, Emily had been rushed to the hospital after collapsing at daycare. Her body was bruised, her back bore contusions, her left leg had a hidden fracture, and her ribs were misaligned. The doctors suspected abuse, and an investigation was launched immediately. The truth slowly unfolded from the marks on her small frame, a truth no one wanted to believe. Emily had been abused by Stephen Harris, her mother's new boyfriend. Stephen had a calm demeanor, a steady job, and even volunteered at local charities. He was trusted, a father figure her mother had hoped would bring warmth to their family. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. Stephen was arrested shortly after. But prosecuting an adult in such cases is never straightforward, especially when the sole witness is a 3-year-old child. No cameras, no other witnesses, only Emily's testimony. And for that testimony to count in court, the child had to stand before the judge and point to the person who hurt her. The problem was Emily wouldn't speak a word. She was locked in her own world, shutting out all communication. Psychologists called it severe PTSD. They feared that without a breakthrough, the case would collapse, and Stephen, the man who shattered a little girl's world, might walk free due to lack of direct evidence. That's when Max came into the picture. Max didn't question her, didn't push her, didn't try to draw answers like the adults did. He simply lay beside her, eyes half closed, his head resting on her lap. For days, Emily didn't react. But one afternoon, her guardian noticed something. Emily reached out and gently touched Max's ear. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched another living being since the start of the case. Day by day, a quiet bond grew between Emily and Max, like a small miracle unfolding. She began to whisper unintelligible words into his ear. She laughed, a small, fleeting laugh, but real. And then one day, when an officer sitting nearby asked, "Is Max your friend?" Emily nodded. It was the first verbal response she'd given anyone. From that moment on, every preparation for the trial centered on one goal: keeping Max by Emily's side at all costs. The prosecutor filed a special request to allow Max into the courtroom, an unprecedented move in such a high-profile case. The court approved, a groundbreaking decision. Outside, media pressure intensified. Local news outlets reported daily, calling it a landmark case for child justice. Public opinion was divided. Some supported Stephen, claiming it was outrageous to convict someone based solely on a toddler's words. Others demanded justice, outraged by the horror inflicted on an innocent child. But everyone agreed on one thing: Emily Carter had become the emotional center of the entire legal system. And Emily, she still sat there quietly each day with Max beside her. On the morning of the trial, when her attorney gently asked, "Are you ready to tell the truth, sweetheart?" Emily didn't respond, but she hugged Max tightly, resting her head on his warm fur. In her eyes, a flicker of resolve sparked young, fragile, but unwavering, as if she knew she was the only one who could change what came next. And Max, her loyal companion, would be the wings she needed to rise above the fear. The light in the courtroom was dimmed gently as a rare concession made for the young victim. The warm brown wooden walls, the long benches, and the empty witness stand in the center became the stage for a trial unlike any other in Kingsville County's history. Everyone was waiting for the arrival of a 3-year-old child, the final piece to bring a criminal to justice. Emily Carter stepped inside. She wore a pale gray knitted dress, her small hand tightly gripping the leash of Max, the loyal police dog, who never left her side. Max wore a blue vest embroidered with the words Support K9, Child Trauma Unit, and walked slowly, deliberately, as if he too felt the invisible weight pressing down on Emily's little shoulders. Behind the closed doors, time seemed to stop. Eyes from the jury, attorneys, prosecutors, police officers, and journalists all focused on Emily. Not a whisper, not a cough. Only the soft sound of her small footsteps echoed loudly in the suffocating silence. Emily didn't look at anyone. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, her shoulders trembling slightly, yet she kept moving, step by step, toward the witness stand. Max lifted his head to look at her as if to remind her, "I'm right here." Emily stopped and sat down in the tall chair reserved for witnesses. Max lay down right beneath her body, pressed against the chair's legs. "Miss Carter," a gentle voice came from the prosecutor. "Can you hear me clearly?" Emily didn't answer. She just tilted her head toward Max, then nodded softly. Across the room, Stephen Harris sat silently, his face unreadable. Dressed in a neat suit, his cold eyes betrayed no remorse. He tilted his head, trying to catch Emily's gaze. But suddenly, Max sprang up, standing firmly between him and the girl, silent but resolute. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Max's stance was not aggressive but full of understanding and protection. The prosecutor stepped closer, crouching to Emily's eye level. "Can you show me who in this room hurt you?" No one dared breathe deeply. Emily bit her lip. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at her hands, then back to Max. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. 1 minute, 2 minutes passed in agonizing suspense. A whisper rose from the reporter's row, quickly hushed by the judge. Then, Max gently nudged Emily's right thigh, letting out a soft whimper, a gentle encouragement. Emily placed her hand on Max's head and squeezed lightly. Then those tiny lips parted. For the first time in court, she spoke, "He," her voice like a faint breeze. "Stephen, he hurt me." It was like a thunderclap in the courtroom. Those on the prosecutor's side raised their eyebrows. Some reporters frantically scribbled notes. Emily's mother, sitting behind with trembling hands, broke down, sobbing, muffling her cries with a handkerchief. The judge nodded, eyes stern. "Thank you, Emily." Stephen's defense attorney stood abruptly. "Objection. This testimony lacks verification, and my client maintains the presumption of innocence. A child this young cannot provide reliable testimony." The judge waved a hand. "Objection noted, but the child has the right to speak. We will consider this testimony within the context of the entire case." Emily didn't understand the legal arguments, but she understood one thing: she had just bravely faced the worst nightmare of her life. She looked at Max, then in a move that shocked everyone, pointed directly at Stephen and said, "He scares me every night. I don't want to go home with him." Stephen paled. At that moment, the entire jury shifted. The silence shattered under the rapid typing of the court clerk, the growing murmurs. One juror adjusted their glasses, eyes moist. No one looked at Stephen as an innocent citizen anymore. They now saw clearly the demon in human form. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice steady and warm. "Thank you, Emily. You have done something that very few adults can do, speak the truth. You were very brave." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tears of relief, no longer heavy with despair. Max jumped up gently, resting his head on her lap and licking her hand in congratulations. The courtroom seemed to soften in that moment. For just a few seconds, a beam of light illuminated the truth. It was revealed by a 3-year-old child and her faithful companion. The judge called a 30-minute recess. As Emily left the witness stand, everyone rose instinctively, not out of legal protocol, but from deep respect. No words were spoken, but their eyes shone with something sacred. Not just justice, but courage. The atmosphere in the courtroom after the recess was no longer the same as before. If the morning had been painted with doubt, now it was an arena ready to explode. Those who had once dismissed the case as a child's fantasy now began to reconsider, and all eyes were fixed on the man with the stiff face and ash-gray eyes, Stephen Harris. Emily was no longer sitting on the witness stand, but had returned to the private waiting room with Max and her mother. Yet her name had become the center of every debate. "We will present the evidence," declared prosecutor Mark Reynolds, his voice cold as steel, "to prove that what that 3-year-old girl just said is not just childish fear, but a warning bell about a dangerous man sitting right here in this room." The first evidence was medical records. A pediatrician was called to testify. She read aloud the diagnoses: unusual bruises, unexplained scratches, extreme anxiety reactions whenever someone raised their hand or raised their voice. "The child is traumatized, not from imagination, but from real experiences," the doctor said, and when asked why she could not speak until today. Next was video footage from a hidden camera at the daycare where Emily had been sent. In a 10-second clip shown on the big screen, Emily sat alone in a corner, trembling as a man, his face not clearly visible, was introduced by the staff as Mr. Harris coming to pick her up. The girl broke down, crying violently, struggling and shouting broken phrases like, "Don't take me, don't make me go." The courtroom fell completely silent again. Stephen Harris closed his eyes, clenched his hands, veins bulging in his neck. The calm he once projected seemed to crack. His lawyer tried to rebut. "Children often overreact to strangers, even relatives they rarely see. That does not prove any wrongdoing." Mark Reynolds did not respond but raised his hand. "We call the next witness," he said. "K-9 Unit Inspector Dana Roberts." Dana stepped up to the stand. A middle-aged woman, her eyes sharp and voice steady. She was the lead trainer of Max the dog. Everyone in court already knew. Since joining the Child Abuse Support Unit, Max has responded to 4 successful cases. In 3 of them, the dog's reactions helped uncover additional evidence. In the 4th, the suspect confessed after encountering Max. The judge nodded. And today, Max doesn't just provide psychological support, Dana continued. He also has the ability to detect signs of stress and fear. When Emily first met Stephen Harris during the initial investigation, Max immediately reacted, ears perked up, whined, and stood in front of the girl as a shield. Stephen began shifting restlessly in his chair. He breathed heavily, leaned back, then forward again. Max, lying beside Emily in the private waiting room, seemed to sense something. His eyes turned toward the hallway, ears standing straight. And then, something no one expected happened. The courtroom door opened slightly. Emily, being let out by her mother to go home, accidentally passed by. Max followed, but as soon as he reached the doorway, he froze. He growled. The hair on his back stood on end. The courtroom turned their heads. Stephen sprang to his feet. Max growled a low, fierce growl never heard before. He lunged not to attack, but to block the path between Emily and Stephen. His whole body taut as a bowstring, eyes bloodshot, barking 3 sharp times, the emergency signal he was trained to give when sensing real danger. Emily broke down in terrified tears. The judge rose and banged the gavel. "Order." Stephen's lawyer tried to pull him back down, but it was too late. The tension had broken Stephen's control. "That little brat is lying," he shouted. "I took care of her, and now she betrays me because of a chicken bomb. An explosion, not of gunfire, but of truth." Max needed no words. Through that action alone, he exposed the fear of the reaction and the true relationship between Emily and the man she had always dreaded mentioning. And Stephen tore off his own mask in front of dozens of witnesses. The prosecutor needed no further comment. Emily was led out of the courtroom with her mother and Max, who cast one last glance at the room with eyes no longer filled with fear, but liberation. The early morning light streamed through the tall courtroom windows, casting long shadows over the worn wooden benches. After 4 tense days of trial, no one had expected what seemed like a simple case to gradually become the city's focal point. People spoke of a 3-year-old child who dared to face her fear, of a man once regarded as a model member of the community, and of a dog not as a performer, but as a guardian and a detector. Today was the day of the verdict. Stephen Harris entered the courtroom wearing a wrinkled suit and bloodshot eyes, far different from the usual cold demeanor. The entire city had seen the final video released yesterday, a recording from a hidden microphone in the family's office where he once thought he could safely utter threats to Emily when no one was watching. In the recording, his harsh voice was clear. "If you tell anyone, I'll make you regret it. Even if it's a young, I won't let it go." No one spoke when the recording ended, but no words were needed. That evidence fell like a hammer on the last shred of belief. Emily was not present in the courtroom today. After Max's fateful growl the day before, she suffered mild panic and was receiving special care at a child psychology center. But Max was there not as a witness, but as a living symbol of resilience. He lay at the feet of Dana the trainer, his eyes never leaving the judge's bench. Judge Carlton, known for his sternness, entered with a firmer expression than ever before. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering longest on Stephen. Before delivering the verdict, he said, "I want to emphasize that this is not just a criminal trial. It is a reminder of how fragile trust can be, and also proof that sometimes justice comes from the least expected places." The defense attorney stood to deliver his closing argument, hoping to reduce the charges. He cited Stephen's past volunteer work, his dedication to the community, and his fragile mental state after divorce. But no one in the room wanted to hear more. Prosecutor Mark Reynolds rose, his gaze piercing. "There is no excuse, no pain that justifies hurting a child, especially when that person is supposed to be trusted by that child." The judge nodded. He raised the gavel, his voice deep and resonant. "Stephen Harris, with irrefutable evidence, witness testimonies, audio recordings, and medical records. This court finds you guilty on all counts: child abuse, witness intimidation, and intentional concealment of criminal acts." Stephen trembled. "For each count, you are sentenced to 10 years in prison to be served consecutively. A total of 30 years with no parole for the first 20 years. A sob echoed from the back rows. The judge struck the gavel again. "And one final note," he said, his eyes softening as he looked at Max. "Throughout the investigation and trial, the presence and response of the Max played a vital role in supporting the victim through trauma and providing evidence in this case. This court hereby declares Max an honorary member of the K-9 unit, awarded lifetime recognition and protection by the city." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Max, as if sensing the significance of the moment, gently stood and rested his head on Dana's knee. He needed no glory, only peace for the little girl he had protected. 3 months later, a warm spring sun shone down on a small park in the city's south. A special ceremony was held, not a military-style formal event, but a cozy family gathering. Max was awarded a Medal of Honor by the city mayor. The photo capturing Max receiving the red ribbon inscribed "Bravery" quickly spread across social media. Emily appeared today. She wore a pale yellow dress, her hand tightly holding her mother's. But what stood out most was her face, not panicked, but shyly smiling. Max ran over and gently nudged her hand. "Max is here," she whispered. Camera flashes popped. A reporter asked Dana, "What do you think of Max after everything?" Dana looked at Max, then at Emily. "I've trained many service dogs, but Max didn't just perform his duty. He sensed what humans often miss: silence, pain without words, and he never turned away." As the ceremony ended, a little boy approached Emily, holding out his hand. "Your name's Emily, right? I'm Sam. I used to be afraid of adults too. It's she." But not anymore, thanks to a cat, Emily smiled. I have Max. The two children took each other's hands playing near the fountain. Max sat nearby, ears, alert tail, softly wagging eyes, never leaving the girl, like a guardian angel. And somewhere in the world, when justice is served not just by laws, but by love, trust, and silent protection, there will always be a dog like Max, brave and quiet, making even the darkest nights bow before the light. In a chaotic and silent world, there are beings who need no words to speak the truth. Max the brave dog not only helped expose evil, but also warmed the heart of a wounded child. Today's story is not just about justice served in a courtroom. It is proof of the invisible power of loyalty, empathy beyond species, and love that heals the deepest wounds. We often think heroes wear armor or carry medals, but sometimes a hero has soft fur eyes that speak and a heart without fear. Max is proof of that. If you believe animals are more than companions, that they are souls who love and protect, please like, share, and subscribe to Animal Tales Daily. We're here to tell stories that touch the heart, where humans and animals connect through the most beautiful thing, trust. See you in the next magical story.